My name is Laura Whitman. I'm 47 years old, a former operations manager who now works as a part-time consultant. I'm divorced, live alone, and I don't talk much about my career at family gatherings, mostly because no one ever asks. The mashed potatoes turned cold on my plate as Derek's laughter filled the Christmas dining room. Laura, here is what happens when you never really work a day in your life. His voice boomed across the table. Everyone stopped eating. Forks froze midair. My face burned hot despite the December cold seeping through the windows. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting to see what I'd do. Derek leaned back in his chair with that smug grin, like he'd just told the world's funniest joke. My sister Amanda stared down at her napkin. Uncle Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. Little Tommy played with his toy truck under the table, oblivious. But Derek wasn't finished. He never was when he had an audience eating out of his hand. 47 years old and still pretending to have a career? He raised his wine glass, red drops splashing onto the white tablecloth. That's dedication to being a freeloader. My knuckles went white around my fork. He didn't stop. He doubled down. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation going. Derek lifted his glass higher, really getting into it now. No, seriously. We should all take notes on what not to do with our lives. His voice dripped with fake concern. Single at her age, no kids, bouncing between random part-time gigs she calls consulting. He made exaggerated air quotes with his free hand. Uncomfortable laughter scattered around the table. Amanda's mom looked away. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it without saying anything. Derek, that's enough, Amanda whispered, but her voice barely carried 2 feet. He waved her off like brushing away a fly. Amanda and I work real jobs. We have real responsibilities. We contribute to society. He paused, letting that sink in. Meanwhile, Laura just coasts along, showing up for free holiday meals. Each word hit like a slap. I pushed my chair back slowly. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor in the sudden quiet. Excuse me, I managed to say. My voice sounded far away. I need some air. I walked toward the bathroom, my heels clicking down the hallway. I overhear him outside the door. I stood in the hallway, hand pressed against the cool wall, trying to catch my breath. That's when Derek's voice carried clearly from the dining room. He wasn't even trying to be quiet anymore. Look, I love Laura, but let's be real here. She's basically dead weight at these family things. Someone said something I couldn't make out. Probably Amanda trying to shut him up. What? I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking, Derek continued. His voice was loud and confident. She never hosts anything, never contributes to the family, just shows up and takes. Classic freeloader. Another voice, maybe Uncle Harold. That seems harsh, don't you think? Derek laughed. Harsh? It's the truth. She's a cautionary tale man. This is what happens when you drift through life without any real purpose or ambition. My hand dropped from the wall. Something cold and hard settled deep in my chest, pushing out the embarrassment and hurt. This wasn't a joke that went too far. This was what he actually believed about me. What he'd probably been saying behind my back for years. I decided I won't confront him. Not yet. Let me tell you who I really am, since Derek clearly had no clue. My name is Laura Whitman. I'm 47 years old. Divorced. No kids. But a freeloader? Let me paint the real picture for you. 15 years ago, I was operations manager at Hartfield Industries, one of the biggest logistics companies in the state. I had a corner office on the 20th floor overlooking the harbor. 6-figure salary. Stock options. A reputation for fixing departments nobody else could save. Then Dad had his first stroke. Mom couldn't handle it alone. She was falling apart, calling me at 3 in the morning because Dad forgot how to tie his shoes. So I made a choice. I stepped back from climbing the corporate ladder and took consulting work with flexible hours. I could be there when Dad needed his medications. When Mom needed someone to hold her while she cried. I chose family over career glory, and I never complained about it once. But I also never corrected anyone's assumptions about my life. I didn't think I needed to prove anything to anyone. That silence is about to matter. Christmas dinner limped to an awkward end. People left earlier than usual, mumbling about long drives and early mornings. I slipped out before dessert, claiming a headache nobody questioned. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and replayed conversations. My phone buzzed around midnight. Amanda's name lit up the screen. He didn't mean it like that. You know how Derek gets after a few drinks. He feels terrible. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then I locked my phone without responding. I wasn't angry at Derek anymore. That feeling had already burned out. I was angry at myself for sitting through years of small digs and never pushing back, for letting a false story about my life turn into concrete truth in everyone's minds. The next morning, Amanda sent 3 more texts. I deleted them without reading any of them. I spent the week between Christmas and New Year's alone in my apartment, working on a detailed proposal for Hartfield's new distribution system. It was complex work that needed total focus, the kind that reminded me I was actually good at something. 2 weeks later, everything shifts. When my phone rang on January 8th, I almost ignored it. But Amanda's name kept flashing across the screen with that desperate buzz that meant she wouldn't stop calling. I picked up on the 4th ring. Laura? Oh, thank God you answered. Her voice cracked with stress I'd rarely heard from my usually calm sister. She took a shaky breath that sounded close to crying. It happened so fast. I still can't wrap my head around it. What happened? I asked, sitting down on my couch. Derek was laid off yesterday, she said. The words tumbled out in a rush. Complete surprise. They called it restructuring. Eliminated his entire department in one meeting. My stomach did a strange flip. Derek had worked at Kingston Dynamics for almost 12 years. Senior project manager. He loved bragging about his performance reviews at every family dinner. I'm so sorry, Amanda, I said automatically. And I meant it mostly. Losing your job was brutal, no matter who it happened to. We have some savings, she continued, talking faster now. Maybe 4 months if we're really careful. He's already applying everywhere. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, gathering courage. Then my name comes up. Actually, that's kind of why I called, Amanda said. My whole body tensed. I already knew what was coming. Derek's applying to Hartfield Industries, she continued. You used to work there, right? Before you went into consulting. The question hung between us like a live wire. You still have contacts there? Amanda pressed. People who might remember you? Who could maybe put in a good word? I stood up and walked to my kitchen window. I stared out at the gray January sky. Did I have contacts at Hartfield? That was the understatement of the century. I'd been consulting for them on major projects for the past 3 years. Not full-time. Not in any public role. But deep enough that I had the VP of operations on speed dial. The division head sent me birthday cards every single year. My recommendations had shaped their last 2 strategic shifts. Amanda had absolutely no idea about any of this. Derek certainly didn't have a clue. I might know a few people there, I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral and calm. He'll need good references, Amanda added. Strong ones. Would you be willing to help? I do. Very well. After Amanda hung up, I sat with my coffee and let the full irony wash over me like a wave. Derek thought I was a washed-up failure with no real career. Meanwhile, I'd spent the last 3 years quietly rebuilding Hartfield's entire supply chain infrastructure from scratch. They paid me more for 2 days of consulting work each month than Derek made in 6 weeks at Kingston. But I'd never mentioned any of it at family gatherings. Never posted about my work on social media. Never felt the need to perform my success for an audience that didn't actually care. I preferred working behind the scenes, solving real problems that mattered without needing applause or recognition. That quiet approach meant Derek had built an entire story about my life based on assumptions and silence. Now that story was about to become extremely important to his future. I pulled up my text messages and scrolled back 3 months. Derek's last message to me was a forwarded meme about middle-aged people still renting apartments with his comment, "Thought of you, lol." I hadn't responded back then. Now I typed, "Heard about Kingston. Happy to help however I can." I hit send and smiled. And he has no idea. Derek's response came through in less than 3 minutes. Laura. Wow, thanks so much. Really appreciate you reaching out. A pause, then another message. If you're serious about helping, I'm applying to Hartfield Industries. Would you mind being a professional reference? I know it's asking a lot. I stared at my phone, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear as he typed something else, then deleted it, then started typing again. The old version of me would have said yes immediately. Would have been eager to smooth everything over, to prove I wasn't the type to hold grudges, to make everyone comfortable again as fast as possible. But something fundamental had shifted inside me since Christmas dinner. I wasn't that person anymore. I let an hour pass without responding. Then 2 hours. I wanted him to sit with the uncertainty for a little while, to feel what it was like to need something from someone he dismissed and mocked. Finally, around dinner time, I typed back, "Sure, I can do that." His relief practically jumped off the screen. "You're a lifesaver." Seriously. I know things have been weird, but family's family, right? I didn't answer immediately. Within 2 days, Derek had sent me his resume and cover letter. Both were professionally formatted and looked impressive on paper. I had to admit, his accomplishments at Kingston were genuine. He had real project management skills, solid technical knowledge, and a track record of delivering results on time and under budget. He wasn't incompetent at his job. He was just cruel to people he saw as beneath him. Derek started texting me regular updates like we were suddenly close friends. First interview scheduled for next week. HR said my resume really impressed them. I think I've got a real shot at this position. Each message arrived with assumed familiarity, as if Christmas had never happened. As if years of dismissive comments could just be erased by sudden need. I kept my responses brief and professional. "That's great. Good luck. Keep me posted." What fascinated me was how quickly his entire tone toward me had changed. At Christmas, I was a cautionary tale and a freeloader. Now I was someone whose opinion had value. Whose connections actually mattered. Whose help was worth asking for. The irony wasn't lost on me. I replay Christmas in my head before replying. His relief is instant. He assumes I owe him. Derek kept sending updates over the next 2 weeks. Made it to second round. They really seem interested. Meeting with the hiring manager next Tuesday. I noticed how he'd started treating me like we were on the same team, like old allies working toward a common goal. It was interesting watching respect return so quickly when someone desperately needed something from you. I ran into Amanda at the grocery store in late January. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes I hadn't seen before. "Derek's so stressed about this Hartfield opportunity," she confided while we stood in the produce section. "It's his best prospect so far. The interviews keep moving forward, but everything takes so long." I nodded with understanding. These processes always do. What I didn't tell her was that Hartfield's hiring system moved slowly because I'd helped redesign it 3 years ago. We'd built in multiple checkpoints specifically to catch problematic hires before they could damage teams. My phone rang that evening while I was reviewing contracts. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Ms. Whitman? This is Nolan Burke from Hartfield Industries. I'm calling about Derek Patterson." Then the recruiter calls me. My heart rate kicked up slightly, but I kept my voice perfectly calm and professional. "Of course, Nolan. I've been expecting your call." Nolan was Hartfield's senior recruiter. Someone I'd worked with extensively when we redesigned their entire interview process. He knew exactly who I was and what I did for the company. "Derek listed you as a professional reference," Nolan continued. "We'd really appreciate your honest assessment of his work ethic, his technical abilities, and especially his management style." I glanced at my wall clock. 5:30 in the evening. I had all the time in the world. "I can definitely do that," I said. Though I should mention up front that I haven't worked directly with Derek in any professional setting. My knowledge comes from family connections and general industry observations over many years. There was a brief pause. "That's helpful context to have. Even so, any insights you can share would be valuable." I chose my next words very carefully. Deliberately. "Honestly, Derek is technically competent," I began. "His project management skills are solid. He understands timelines, budgets, and deliverables. He meets deadlines and produces quality results. I paused. However, I have real concerns about how he treats people he sees as beneath him. I hang up feeling strangely peaceful. A full week crawled by in complete silence. Derek's enthusiastic text update stopped abruptly. No more exclamation points. No more confident predictions about landing the job. The sudden quiet felt heavy, like waiting for a thunderstorm to finally break. Then, on a Tuesday evening while I was reviewing contracts at home, my phone rang. Amanda. Have you talked to Derek lately? Her voice was tight and wound up with worry. Not since last week, I said, setting down my pen. Why? What's going on? She let out a long, shaky breath. Something happened with the Hartfield interview process. They gave him feedback that was mixed. He won't tell me the specific details, but he's been absolutely furious for 3 straight days now. My stomach clenched slightly, though not with guilt. More with anticipation of what was coming next. Mixed feedback, how? I asked carefully. Something about concerns with his management style. Interpersonal dynamics with subordinates. Someone apparently raised red flags. Amanda paused, and I could hear suspicion creeping into her voice. Laura, you were one of his references. Did Hartfield call you? I kept my voice absolutely steady. Yes, they did. And I told them the truth. Something went wrong. The line went completely silent for several long seconds. When Amanda finally spoke again, her voice had changed completely. What does that mean exactly, Laura? What truth? Before I could answer, I heard a click. Someone had picked up another phone in their house. Derek. What the hell did you tell them? He demanded. His voice shook with barely controlled rage. Every word came out clipped and precise, like he was physically fighting to keep from screaming. I switched my phone to speaker and set it carefully on the coffee table, creating both physical and emotional distance. They asked me for an honest professional reference, I said calmly. That's exactly what I provided. What specifically did you say? Derek pressed harder. They asked about my leadership skills, my interpersonal abilities, my management approach. And suddenly they have serious concerns about all of it. I took a slow, steady breath and repeated my feedback almost word for word. His technical competence. His solid project management abilities. His capacity to deliver results. And yes, his consistent pattern of being dismissive and sometimes cruel toward people he considered inferior to himself. That's complete garbage, Derek snapped. You're holding a grudge over one stupid Christmas joke. He calls, angry but controlled. He explodes. Am I holding a grudge? I asked quietly. Or am I simply describing behavior I've personally witnessed over many years? That was at family dinners. Derek's voice rose. That's completely different from professional work settings. You can't judge my job performance based on casual family jokes. Is it really that different, though? I leaned back against my couch cushions, feeling oddly calm despite everything. Character doesn't magically change based on your surroundings, Derek. How you treat a restaurant server tells me exactly as much about who you are as how you'd treat an intern at work. Amanda's voice cut through, small and shocked. Derek, what is she talking about? What exactly did you do? He completely ignored her. You're punishing me. This is revenge for Christmas, isn't it? You're bitter and petty. I'm not punishing you for anything, I said, maintaining my level tone. I'm simply no longer protecting you from the natural consequences of your own behavior. There's a significant difference between those two things. Derek's breathing had turned ragged and harsh. You bitter, spiteful. I told them exactly what you tell everyone about me. I interrupted calmly. That I'm nothing special. That I haven't accomplished anything meaningful. That I'm a cautionary tale. I remind him I only told the truth, the same way he did at Christmas. He goes quiet. The silence stretched out long and uncomfortable. When Derek finally spoke again, all the anger had drained from his voice. So you are holding it against me. I'm holding you accountable, I corrected gently. Those are very different things, Derek. The line went dead. He'd hung up without another word. 3 days later, Amanda called again. This time her voice carried a different quality entirely. Resignation mixed with confusion and maybe a hint of something else. They offered him a position, she said without any preamble or greeting. I sat up straighter on my couch, genuinely surprised. That's wonderful news. It's not the position he applied for, Amanda continued quickly. It's 2 full levels lower than what he wanted. Analyst instead of senior manager. The salary is 30% less than what he was making at Kingston. She paused, and I heard her swallow hard. And there are no direct reports at all. It's purely an individual contributor role with no management responsibilities. I absorbed that information carefully. Hartfield had done exactly what I'd quietly hoped they might do. They'd assessed Derek's technical abilities and found them genuinely valuable and worth having. But they'd also taken my feedback seriously enough to place him somewhere his interpersonal problems couldn't damage people working under him. He's insulted. He refuses it. Winter slowly gave way to early spring. Through the extended family grapevine, I heard scattered updates about Derek's deteriorating situation. Still job hunting with no success. Still refusing the Hartfield offer out of wounded pride. Their savings account draining faster every single week. My mother mentioned in a careful, worried voice during a phone call that Derek and Amanda might need to sell their house soon if things didn't turn around. I felt genuine sympathy for Amanda. She was innocent collateral damage in a conflict she hadn't started and didn't fully understand. But when I thought about Derek, I felt nothing except a distant, clinical interest in watching someone face real consequences for their own choices, possibly for the first time in their entire life. I focused on my own work instead of dwelling on family drama. Hartfield was expanding operations into 3 new regional markets, and they desperately needed my expertise on logistics integration across different regulatory environments. The project was massive, incredibly complex, and exactly the kind of strategic challenge I'd always loved tackling. I was genuinely good at this work. I'd always been exceptionally good at it. I just hadn't needed to prove that fact to people whose opinions didn't actually matter. Then he needs another reference. One Sunday afternoon in May, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I wasn't expecting any deliveries or visitors. Through the peephole, I saw Derek standing on my front porch. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets. His shoulders hunched forward. He looked smaller somehow than I remembered him being. I opened the door but didn't invite him inside. We stood on opposite sides of the threshold, studying each other in uncomfortable silence. Derek's face was drawn and pale. His eyes looked tired and defeated. He'd lost noticeable weight. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I crossed my arms but nodded once. "I was wrong," he said quickly, like he'd rehearsed the words 100 times. "At Christmas. The things I said about you. The way I treated you in front of everyone. I was completely wrong." I waited without responding. Let him fill the silence. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. "I've been out of work for 5 months now. We're drowning financially. Amanda's exhausted from working double shifts. I'm exhausted from constant rejection." He looked up and met my eyes directly. "I need another reference for a different position. I'm desperate." The audacity of it took my breath away. He shows up at my door. Humble. Broken. Apologetic, finally. I don't answer right away. I looked at him standing there on my porch. Pride and desperation fought for control of his expression. Part of me wanted to close the door in his face, to let him figure this situation out completely on his own without any help from me. But another part of me, the part that remembered who I used to be before I learned to set real boundaries, just felt tired of the whole exhausting cycle. "I'll help you," I said finally. Derek's entire face flooded with visible relief. But only under very specific conditions that aren't negotiable. The relief flickered and dimmed. "Conditions? What kind of conditions?" I nodded slowly. "You need to acknowledge publicly what you did to me. Not just to me privately, but to the entire family. At the next gathering where everyone's present." His mouth opened, then closed without sound. "You want me to humiliate myself in front of everyone?" "I want you to take real accountability," I corrected firmly. "The same way you humiliated me in front of everyone at Christmas. No excuses. No minimizing what you did. No trying to pass it off as jokes. Just honest truth and a real apology." Derek's face turned red. "That's not fair to ask." "Neither was Christmas dinner," I said calmly. "But those are my terms. Take them or leave them completely." He hesitates. He stood there for a long moment. His jaw worked silently. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to find another way out. And if I do this, he finally said, you'll give me a good reference that helps me get hired? I'll give you an honest reference, I corrected. Which means I'll include any genuine growth I've witnessed in you. If I actually witness real growth and change. Derek stared at me hard. Then, very slowly, he nodded once. Fine. I'll do it. The next family gathering was my mother's birthday party in early June. The usual crowd assembled in her backyard. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze. I arrived early and stayed quiet, watching Derek and Amanda come in later. They both looked tense and uncomfortable. After dinner, as birthday cake was being served to everyone, Derek stood up abruptly. He cleared his throat loudly. Conversations around the yard died down gradually as people noticed him standing. I need to say something important, he announced. His voice carried across the yard. Everyone turned to look at him with curious expressions. He glanced at me once, his face pale, then addressed the whole gathered family. Last Christmas, I said some terrible, cruel things about Laura. The room is stunned. My sister cries. All eyes turn to me. I sat perfectly still with my untouched cake in front of me. Every single face at the party was now staring at me, waiting to see how I'd respond. The old Laura would have minimized everything immediately. Would have said it was fine, water under the bridge, no big deal. Would have made everyone comfortable again as quickly as possible. But I wasn't her anymore. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. I accept your apology, Derek. I paused deliberately, letting those words settle over everyone. And I will help you with the reference you need. But I want to be very clear about something important. I looked around at each family member, making direct eye contact. I'm not doing this as someone beneath him helping someone more important. I'm doing this as a professional peer, as an equal in every way. Derek nodded slowly, understanding the shift. I understand completely, and I won't soften any truth, I continued firmly. I'll tell them honestly about your technical skills. I'll tell them about this apology we're having right now, about the growth I'm seeing in you. But I'll also be completely honest about your past behavior patterns and my remaining concerns. That's fair, Derek said quietly, his voice barely carrying. I agree to be a reference again, but only as a peer, not a subordinate. The recruiter calls once more. 2 weeks later, I received another call from a different company. Different recruiter this time. Ms. Whitman, we're considering Derek Patterson for a team coordinator position in supply chain operations. We understand you've provided references for him before. I smiled slightly at my phone. I have. And I'd be happy to speak with you again about him. This conversation felt different from the first one. I talked about Derek's technical abilities with genuine respect this time. I mentioned his solid project management experience and attention to detail. And I also talked about our recent family gathering. About his public accountability. About the personal growth that comes from facing uncomfortable truths about yourself. He's learning and changing, I said carefully and honestly. Whether he's learned enough yet is ultimately for you to determine based on your needs. But I have seen real evidence of meaningful change in him. The recruiter thanked me and the call ended. I didn't hear anything back for 10 long days. Then my phone rang. Derek. I got it. His voice was thick with emotion. The coordinator position. It's not everything I wanted or expected, but it's good. It's really good and I'm grateful. Congratulations, I said sincerely. And I genuinely meant it this time. He gets a job. The rail win isn't his job. The shift in family dynamics after that was subtle but completely undeniable. At the next few gatherings over the summer, people started asking me real questions. About my consulting work. About logistics and operations management. About career decisions and professional strategy. My uncle wanted detailed advice on streamlining his small business operations. My cousin asked thoughtful questions about career transitions in her 30s. Even my mother pulled me aside one warm evening and said something that stuck with me. I never fully realized how much you were actually doing with your career. Why didn't you ever tell us about it? I shrugged. I didn't think I needed to prove anything to anyone. You were protecting us, she said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. From feeling guilty about Dad. about all the choices and sacrifices you made for our family. Maybe she was right about that. Maybe I'd been so determined not to burden anyone that I'd accidentally let them create their own incorrect narrative about my life. One that diminished me unfairly. I'm proud of you, my mother added, squeezing my hand. Not just for your career success, for how you handled everything with Derek. I hugged her tight and felt something unclench deep in my chest. Christmas comes again. Christmas came around again. Full circle back to where everything had started exactly 1 year ago. We gathered at my mother's house again, the same dining room that held so many difficult memories. I arrived with wine and homemade cookies, feeling genuinely lighter than I had in years. Derek and Amanda came in with their kids shortly after. When Derek saw me near the door, he walked over immediately and directly. Laura. He extended his hand formally. Thank you for coming today. We shook hands. It felt respectful, professional, equal. After dinner was finished, after all the presents were opened and dessert was served, Derek stood up again. My stomach tightened slightly, wondering what was coming this time. I want to make a toast, he announced, raising his glass high. Everyone looked up with interest. To Laura, Derek said clearly, for her incredible generosity, her patience with me, and her integrity through everything. He paused, looking directly at me with genuine respect. I spent way too many years not seeing you clearly, not respecting what you'd accomplished or what you'd sacrificed for this family. His voice was steady and sincere. You could have held all of that against me forever. Instead, you gave me a real chance to grow, to become better. He thanks me publicly. No jokes, no smirks, just humility. I finally speak. Glasses clinked all around the table. My mother had happy tears running down her cheeks. Amanda smiled at me with real warmth and gratitude. I raised my own glass and nodded once in acknowledgement. We all drank together. As the evening finally wound down and people started gathering coats and saying goodbyes, I found myself alone in the kitchen washing dishes in comfortable silence. Derek appeared quietly in the doorway. Need some help with those? He offered. Sure, I said, handing him a clean dish towel. We worked together in silence for a few minutes. The comfortable kind that comes from real understanding between people. Derek dried a large serving platter with careful attention. I've been thinking a lot about last Christmas, he said finally. About what I said to you. About what you could have done to me in response. I rinsed a wine glass under hot water, watching bubbles swirl down the drain. And you were in a position to completely ruin me, he said quietly. You had connections and influence I didn't know about. Didn't respect. You could have made absolutely sure I never worked anywhere again. He carefully placed the dry platter in the cupboard. Instead, you just told the simple truth. Even when it hurt me. Even when lying would have been so much easier. I say calmly, funny how being a freeloader still put me in the position to decide your future. I smile. The table is silent. And for the first time in years, I'm free.